Haktu and hallelujah, good morning stallions and stallionettes. This is not a Turtle Beach bashing video. I did purchase the Pivot controller with 130 of my own dollars, despite the fact I do have a Turtle Beach POC or representative that gladly would have sent the controller for review. However, even around the holidays, it seems that Amazon gets to my doorstep quicker, and I'm glad that I got this controller in hand as quick as humanly possible so I could get my initial impressions out. And I am going to do a follow-up or long-term ownership review of this controller, as I tend to do with all of my pads over time, but I do need to get my thoughts out immediately because this controller is selling like hotcakes because it is a new controller that looks relatively promising. How I know it's selling like cakes that are hot off the press is the fact that there was only 2 left in stock when I bought mine off Amazon, and it was also sold out on the TB website. So people are buying this, and it's gotta be initial anticipation or hype, maybe some FOMO, fear of missing out on a new controller. As somebody that tests and reviews more gamepads than any human being with a pulse should, I'm gonna have to advise all y'all to go ahead and about face and maybe, heel to toe pivot away from this model. See what I did? It's called the Pivot. Oh my God. Now, the key notable feature of this controller is a pivot or swappable module system. Not swappable in the regards that you're thinking of, where you can pull them out and remove them, switch them out for replacement parts. The modules just unlock and then pivot. At the end of the day, it's a really clumsy design, but I will give TB some points for creativity. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a B for effort here because they are breaking the mold and showing some true innovation, some different shit that we have not seen. But there were 3 or 4 methods that could have been implemented that would have been substantially more cost effective for the company to produce, so it's not a $130 controller, but also at the end of the day would have made it a much more enjoyable controller for all of you. Let's get it. The PC scumbag shirts, which this one is way too tight on my tits right now, so I'm about to take it off and get a properly fitting shirt. Cool ass design. These are available in the merch store. I keep peeking and popping like I'm AD spamming corner peeking or something, but I'm also designing 2 really slick ass, kicking the sack ass designs that are going to be hitting the merch store pretty soon. Thought I'd mention that considering this video is kind of technically sponsored by myself. Also, I have recently switched my microphone setup. I am now using a Beacon USB microphone, which is insane to say considering I do have a $400 Go XLR and a $400 Shure SM7B to plug to that. And I have dabbled with several XLR and USB microphones over the years. I even have a tutorial how to make any USB microphone sound presentable for content creation, live streaming, or YouTube. But awkwardly enough, I've landed back on a USB microphone because it sounds really sick and it's really simple to set up and use. Review coming soon on this. Main reason I mention this is there has been some complaints in the comment section over like mouth clicking noises and stuff. Yeah, my medication gives me dry mouth. So yeah, I got a little thing of water right here, but sometimes you're going to hear some pops, clicks, and smacks. Get over it. Although you don't really need to get over it anymore because I switched up my microphone setup. I heard some people trying to really audio engineer some shit and being like, oh, it's your compressor, and calm down there, audio engineer. I know everything you're telling me, bud. This microphone has simply solved it for the few people that were complaining about that. You want to bust the big channels nuts over their audio quality? Charlie, Penguin Z0, love the guy, bangs his desk with his elbow and you hear a fucking reverb of like 2 gongs getting smacked in your auditory cavities. Go critique somebody else. When I first saw the box, I noticed that it was substantially smaller than almost any controller I have reviewed. Now, having a normal sized brain, I didn't think that the controller was physically going to be smaller like a toy or anything, but I did logically think there's going to be less included accessories, definitely not a carrying case. Silica gel packet that'll kill your kids and dogs. Your controller's held in a Condor's condom. You do have a 10-foot braided USB-C cable that is good, not great. You will have the most simple instruction placard or card ever, as it's really just showing you how to unlock and swap your pivot modules. Then you got a piece of paper telling you to twist the thumbstick caps, which you will need to do in order for them to sink down closer to the shell so you can actually pivot or swap the modules. I say swap, you don't really swap them. They stay in the body of the controller and you turn them. You pivot them. You don't actually take them out. You do have a 2.4 gigahertz receiver. It is labeled Stealth Pivot on the back, so if you have other Turtle Beach devices, you won't get the this dongle confused, which is nice. There's also a repairing button on the front, and overall the dongle is pretty nice. The dongle is held in this little box, which is perfectly sized for the dong itself. And then you have a quick start guide. I thought that little placard was the manual. It's not. There's a real instruction manual. I'm a real boy, but this thing will have to remind you of that because it doesn't look like a real instruction manual. It looks like a piece of shit. Cosmetically, you will notice that you have a screen top dead center, which never should have been there. This would have cut down on build costs, making this a cheaper controller for us to purchase. And the only controller that I have tested where I deem the screen actually worth its salt in plastic would be the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, and that is because its functionality with third-party applications. You can get Ring security notifications, medical device alerts. Furthermore than that, if you don't want to go to your computer, you can adjust a ton of settings on that screen. This screen is substantially more limited with the functionality. It is also physically smaller, and cosmetically, it just ain't it. I'm going to loop the accessory button suite in with the cosmetics because right below the screen, you do have a quad of controls with the Xbox home button, a very cheap jewel that's been used on PDP and PowerA controllers for over 2 decades. It actually does genuinely piss me off when I see and press these little jewels because I know where they're sourced from and I know how much I paid for this controller and I know that it shouldn't be here, but I do like that there is a share button so you can save your clips, and then there is a little scroll or toggle which will work like your chat game. The screen, a little tool for navigating the screen. You do also have a plus button at the bottom, which is to enter your screen control mode, just like the Stealth Ultra, and at the bottom you do have a 3.5mm headphone jack with a little gray ring around it. Cosmetically, this is very similar to the Stealth. I will say the baby blue anti-friction rings completely foul up the looks, and Turtle Beach is going to feel very silly printing anti-drift on their Stealth and Pivot controllers when they start receiving claims of stick drift, and customers are staring at a controller that has anti-drift printed on it when clearly they've developed stick drift. As these modules do have a typical recentering spring, and despite the fact they are Hall effect and far less likely to develop stick drift for you than potentiometer sensors, it sure as hell can happen. I do like these little side pieces. Not only do they feel good, I know we're cutting into comfort as the next section, they do feel really good on the hand. They're not swappable. They kind of look like the Thrustmasters, which can be pulled out because they're magnetized, and you can get accent kits on Amazon. These aren't replaceable or swappable, but they do look really cool, and jumping right into comfort, they do feel really nice. Cosmetics though, overall, this just doesn't hit the corneas like I'd like it. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 6 out of 10. As for the comfort, I did start jumping ahead, saying the side grips feel pretty good, and they do, but what doesn't is going to be the thumbstick caps. You really do need to put some add-ons like Control Freaks because the stalkers are cockers. They suck. They're bad. And the shape and shell design is similar to an Xbox layout in the fact that it has offset sticks, but the palm grips are shorter, and then it has a wider center section with a little bit of a hump or bulge, which I'm assuming is for the battery or the 3.5mm jack, which all adds up to not having a perfect place for your middle finger to hike up and rest. A 7 out of 10. 7 out of that 10. As for perceived build quality, all the parts feel good except for the actual pivot section, which feels like cheaper plastics. The buttons feel atrocious on that thing. And the fact is, because you have that swappable, well, not really swappable, that pivotable section, it does cut into the structural integrity a little bit to where you get some flex or moans and groans in the frame, the chassis, if you will, that you would not get if you did not have these two loosey-goosey unlockable sections and they were permanently affixed, which honestly, they should have been on this controller, which should have been about a $100 or $80 controller. No screen, no pivot thing, 2 extra rear buttons, a trigger stop system that actually works, some rubber grips would be sick, some thumbstick caps that feel like something. Damn, that sounded like a verdict section. Let's keep that for later.
Oh, gonna need that for later. Okay, here we go. Follow me, child. Watch my body coming through.
As for the D-pad, you do technically have 2 options, although they are identical. I thought that when you pivoted this thing, it would give you a different D-pad option. That is not the case. You do have an 8-way wheel that's probably one of the worst that I've felt in recent memory because it does feel like one squishy, mushy input. It is the most unrewarding, unconnected experience with a D-pad. I can't tell if I'm pushing down, left, up, right. It's horrendous. It gives you no tactile or auditory feedback, and unlike a lot of the competitors that have some kind of a swappable option like a 4-point typical D-pad and then a wheel, you don't have that here. I'm gonna give the D-pad a 1 out of 10. I don't think you can go lower than that unless I gave it a 0, but that's not even a real number. Well, it's a real number, but not when it comes to reviews around here. Face or action buttons aren't going to do a whole heck of a lot more for you, as these do look and feel like some of the cheapest membrane switches that I've ever introduced flesh to plastic on. Size and spacing do feel similar to a stock Xbox controller. These are hypergloss, so they will collect fingerprints and micro scratches scratches like nobody's business. I do think the font or printing of the lettering looks very cheap. They are membrane, not a huge fan of on anything that's more expensive than a stock controller, and they don't have to be loud, audible, clicky switches. You can have a nice tactile bump like a mechanical keyboard without having a loud click. You got your clickies, your tactiles, and your linears, and then your membrane switches. Oh, and hybrids too. I forgot to, there's hybrids like the KK3 from Ghoulie Kit, which actually uses a little bit of both, resulting in a stupid ass switch that makes no sense. Speaking of making no sense, nickels or dimes, the face buttons, they suck. 2 out of 10. But when you do when you do pivot/swivel them around, you will have a fight pad, which, oh my god, is not even comparable in any way, shape, or form to the only swappable fight pad from a competitor controller, which is some of the Victrix controllers, not the Prime, which is the one that I bashed because they stripped a lot of the features that make a Victrix controller, such as these swappable modules. But this fight pad is so unpleasurable to use, unlike the BFG's fight pad, which has large, flat buttons. These are standard size, round buttons that are also membrane and don't really feel good to spam. You don't really get that same beat 'em up at the arcade, clickety clack in the joysticks feel. This is a shitty ass fight pad, thus dropping my face button score from a 2 down to a 1. These are horrible. As for the bumpers, they really aren't too bad. You do have these little diamond triangles, which give you some stippling for grip, that is on the bumpers and triggers. Cosmetically, the bumpers do stick off the front, the top I should say, more than they should, which makes the controller look a little bit silly, but as far as functionality, you can press them with the meat or ball of your finger. Only issue here is if you have really large hands, you might go up and over the bumpers and be pressing the top of the screen. Pretty use case scenario though, and these bumpers don't offend me, 7 out of 10. As for the triggers, you do have a trigger lock or stop system. I'm gonna give it a piece of praise and then knock it back down. Piece of praise being that it is easy to engage and turn off in gameplay. You don't need to turn the controller around, just flick it on in gameplay, no issue there. The problem is that we've become really spoiled with mechanical digital switches, where when you turn on those trigger stops, it becomes like a mouse click. And it ain't just the $200 and $300 Pro controllers that's doing this. There are $60 entry-level pads from GameSir and FlyDigi that are using the same technology. Now, this is I'm going to call it like an old school trigger lock or stop system. I am overlaying some B-roll of a teardown or disassembly I did on an Elite Series 2 controller, showing you how a trigger lock works. It's a little pegger bar that comes out that stops you from pulling the trigger all the way. That was cool about 4 or 5 years ago. There's $40 to $60 pads that are implementing full-on mechanical mouse click digital switches. We're getting spoiled here. There's a lot of features in controllers now. I'm gonna go ahead and give the bumpers a 5 out of 10, and them trigs, I ain't really triggered, but I ain't having a great time with them neither. I'm gonna go ahead and give these sons of bitches a 3 out of 10. More math. 3 minus 1 is 2. How many rear buttons you got back here? Should be 4 of them. There's 2 of them. That's okay. They have that same triangular stippling, which you get on the bumpers and triggers. They are relatively quiet and are easy to actuate, whether you're pulling inward or upward. This is kind of hard to word this, but whether you're squeezing in towards the palm grips or kind of up into the back shell, kind of like the Steam Deck, how there's 2 different actuation points on the rear buttons. Made a whole video about that, actually. These are pretty damn good. For having just 2 rear buttons, they are 2 good rear buttons. Now, you can assign the mappable action buttons and configure your pro aim sensitivity options, which are kind of the crutch system from aim. You hold down a mappable button and it knocks down your sensitivity. I hate this feature. I think it's stupid, because what happens when you use a controller or mouse that doesn't have that feature and you actually have to attune your aim to using less tracking, less sensitivity? You know what I mean? It's a hindrance. It's a crutch. It is not helping you to get better. And you're giving up one of your bindings, your extra mappable buttons to that feature. So it's a double whammy of don't do it. You can remap those buttons through the screen, although it is not intuitive and takes way more clicks and steps than just holding down a combination of buttons like other controllers let you do. And that would completely negate the the need for a screen, which would have cut the cost down. Speaking of the cost, $130 isn't necessarily a cheap pad, but it's also not an expensive pad. But then you have to take into account not only what the competitors are doing, but also the fact that if you get this for use on Xbox, you are only using it, let me get the microphone a little bit closer for that proximity effect, wired. This is a wired Xbox controller. So it's wireless on the PC side of the house. That's awesome. But the only PC only controller I can think of currently is the Scuff Envision Pro, which is only about 50 bucks more than this and walks laps up and down, back and around on this controller. Basically makes it its bitch. If they were sharing a cell together, this thing would be biting the sheets. And so then we look at the competitors for Xbox, in which case this is just way out of place because you can get yourself, if you're already going to go wired anyway, you're looking at things like the GameSir G7 and T7 and the brand new Cyclone 2, which is wireless and obliterates this controller in every aspect, and that is a wireless controller for under $60 that with a converter or adapter can also be used on PlayStation and Xbox. It's a Switch controller, but you can use it across all three platforms and PC, of course. Oh, that also has 1000 hertz polling rate and real trigger locks and looks better, and you get the point. Over here in Gamepad Tester, for some reason my headset dongle is being recognized in here. I've never seen that before. Here we are, player 3. Usually we're over here in player 2. No big deal. Our visual representation's over here in player 3 today. I do need to extend my thumbstick cap so I can actually turn them. Oh, gotta swivel this one around. It's a stupid design. Wow, that's dumb. Alrighty. They're pretty responsive when you're braking neutral. Also, you can reach the outside of the thumbstick gates. Weird visual representation there. It's actually showing going far over the barrier of 100% on the outside of your thumbstick gates. But they do snap back to a perfect resting value of 0.0002. Let's go ahead and do a little circularity test. These are going to be the square or rectangular modules. As you can see by the fact that the average error is relatively high, but everything is even. Looks like the umbrella logo from Resident Evil. It's good. That's what we like to see. But then we get down to the nitty gritty of how these thumbsticks actually feel in gameplay, and even at 1000 hertz polling rate where I'm getting maximum response of my movements. I'm not going to suck myself off and say that I'm good at shooters or anything like that, but I will say behind the scenes, I've been playing a shitload of COD BO6. I'm already prestige level 4, almost 5. Generally, I'm in the top 3 of every match and have a KD ratio of at least like a 1.6, and that's playing against fucking sweaty McSweatlord and stuff. But if I get like a regular lobby with Christmas noobs and stuff, it's like a 3.0 or 4.0 KD. Put this thing in your hand, that is not the case. Now with this thing, my performance was shit. And that comes down to a couple of things. First of all, these thumbstick caps are hell of slippery. They're slick. Most of that was because the surface, I'm gonna call it plastic. It doesn't even feel like freaking rubber, is so damn slick on these suckers. They're also really small in diameter, as you can tell from the Kontrol Freek compatibility. The Switch ones are so loose you can just pop them right off. PlayStation 4 and 5 hybrids, super loose as well, which means that the Xbox caps, as they are the smallest in diameter, are gonna be the winners. But even those ones, because of the relatively slick rubber on the caps and the fact that they're small in diameter, you can still pinch and twist these. That ain't good for Kontrol Freek compatibility, and the fact that you need some kind of a cap to even feel like a human being using these thumbsticks or like you can stay competitive is a goddamn problem. Getting 1000 samples wired in X input test, we are gonna running 1000 samples at 1000 hertz supposedly from the manufacturer. What you're really gonna see is 125 hertz stock clock for around 6 milliseconds of input lag or delay. What the fuck? What the fuck? And it also, you saw a little spikes of inconsistency in there. Ouchie Wawa, and Ouchie Wawa's what you're going to be saying in multiplayer as well. 125 hertz stock polling rate for around 6 to 8 milliseconds of input lag or delay. Not very consistent either if we do remove that one outlier, which is the large number at the top from when I first started spinning the sticks. Minimum, maximum, far from each other, jitter, high as shit. Also did several pulls off camera. That this is what I was getting consistently back to back. So let's try the dongle, yeah? And the funny thing is, you would definitely think in your brain of brains that wired would be the fastest connection. Au contraire, mon frere. When you are on the Xbox side of the house, you're only using wired, which is going to get you between 6 to 8 milliseconds of input lag or delay. If things look different here, I don't have a webcam border, and my wallpaper's different, and I don't have a translucent thing down here with my icons all pimped or custom. I'm actually on a secondary PC right now, just for funsies while I work on my other computer. I wanted to give you a little context as to why things look and feel a little bit different on the screen. On the PC side of the house, when using the dongle, you're actually around 8, and a very inconsistent 8. As you can see, huge. I don't think I've made that noise before, but it needed to be done. Huge spikes of inconsistency. Now, I do think this will get massaged out a little bit with patches or updates, because you can actually improve wireless performance of, over the wire with updates, but not to the point to where this is going to be acceptable or a recommend for any kind of competitive player. You'll get your tits shredded back. I don't really know when this was added to the Lord of Mice overclocking program, which I use pretty much daily because I don't have a life, but there is now a Battle Beaver sponsored placard down here saying the drivers were signed by them, and then you click over here and it takes you to, not their website. Anyway, let's drop down, select all. What we're doing in Lord of Mice overclocking is seeing if we can do what Turtle Beach could not. I'm recording this little blurb in my bedroom. I have the camera angled upwards on my laptop so you can't see that it looks like a cyclone went off in here, but I do want to point out that looking back at the landing page and also the box, the manufacturer Turtle Beach never once claimed a specific polling rate. However, it is a key notable selling feature. In fact, in the summary of the key features, it is the first bullet point. Lag-free wireless connection. Also, you click on view more specs down here in the tech specs, and you're going to get a, that's not it down here, additional features. A breakout of the lag-free performance. It's a huge selling factor, and as we can see, we're not really free from lag, and it's okay to have a controller or mouse have input lag or delay. In fact, it's expected. But when you're touting this, and you have substantially more input lag or delay than the competitors, that's a little bit of an issue.
Damn, so even in the Lord of Mice overclocking software, you cannot manually overclock as of now. This is subject to change. Shit, the TV could release an update as soon as they see this video, but as of now, this is how the cookie crumbles.
Game-Rant, that's where everyone goes for their controller reviews. In essence, it's 3 controllers in one, and all of them gobble the giblets. Xbox era, never heard of you before.
Who are you?
Forget the Elite 2, the Stealth Pivot, one of the best premium controllers I've used in the last 2 years. I've had the same Elite 2 since 2019, and I would not take the Pivot over that any day of the week. I can confidently say the Pivot is near perfectly hybrid solution. G-Style Magazine, who are you? And I guess that was the only 3 testimonials they could get. Notice there's an asterisk next to all the Xbox consoles, as that is going to be wired only. Now, what I'm really doing here is coming down to support and download so I can get the application. Pivot, Control Center, oh my god, yes, it's for Windows. I don't have to do a phone app, thank you. I'll do it if I have to, oh my god. So this is going to be treated like an application, not a dedicated program that you install on your PC because it is through the Microsoft Store. All these run like applications, meaning there's a lot you can't do. Also has a 2.1 star from 72 ratings. Okay, the pictures look identical to the Stealth app for Xbox and PC though, which I do enjoy. You can control this application with the bumpers, D-pad, left analog stick, bumpers to tab, and then you can also use your mouse to... Don't make me a liar. There we go. You make your mouse. Jeez, you have to click right in the sweet spot. Okay, I wouldn't advise using the mouse because I'm clicking like a psychopath and nothing's really happening. You do have these default profiles which can go back and forth between the application and the onboard memory, just like the Stealth Pro. Now, what I'm doing here is I don't necessarily want to give you guys a full tab-by-tab walkthrough because I've done that before with the Stealth, and this is the same application. I want to come over here to firmware because I'm thinking that maybe if I update these suckers, I'll be getting better clock speeds. Well, that's not the case because you can't click or activate these, and it's also showing that the latest release is V1.0, which would be the first ever. You get the controller out of the box, it's janky, this is what you're on, V1. A patch or update needs to come out because this controller is sold out on pretty much all retailers right now. So you can actually confirm that when you plug in the controller, it will show you the installed version, which is the same as the latest release. Screw it. While I'm here, I am going to give you a full tour walkthrough of this thing.
We'll do it live! Fuck it! Do it live! Fucking thing sucks! 3. That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today.
You do have the LED over here. You can turn it off completely, which I do recommend to save battery life. That only matters if you're on the PC and using the dongle, as if you're on Xbox, you're going wired. I'm a Nimrod. This is just for the charging LED on the top of the controller. This is not for the actual RGB lighting is going to be over here. You can completely turn it off. You do have these static, pretty simple colors over here, but you do also have a wheel if you want to dial in a custom color. You have static, which is constantly on, breathing, which is fading in and out, and then dynamic, which looks like it's rotating through the color spectrum. Effect speed, I always personally put these on slow because I think it's just disorienting and weird when it's flashing all fast. Vibration, you do have impulse motors in the triggers as well as full-size palm motors. These aren't haptics. They're labeled as immersive feedback, but they're just typical rumble forces. Audio is a pretty useful tab. You do have your chat game blend, which keep in mind you can adjust on the fly with that little toggle dial wheel. You do have mic monitoring. I personally hate that. In disable, you do have your chat mix. And this is a cool feature. You do have the superhuman hearing mode of Turtle Beach headsets, which really boosts up the mid-range frequency where gunshots and footsteps usually are. Technically an unfair advantage, but I've always hated these features. I think it makes your gameplay sound completely terrible, for lack of a better word, and it's one of those things, just like the crutch sensitivity that I mentioned earlier, where it's a feature that's only on specific devices, and if you jump to something else, you're screwed. Not to mention, it makes the whole game sound like ass. Out of all these modes, I have always preferred Signature, which is the most flat EQ, which is pretty pretty damn flat. But on some of the TB headsets that were a little bit lackluster in the bass region, they didn't really have much low end, I would click bass boost on. You can set up software trigger dead zones. Keep in mind you do have physical locks, and then this tab is really useful because you have a physical representation just like gamepad tester, and you can set up your dead zones. I'm going to leave this at 5 on the left, bump this down to 0 on the right. This is where you're going to remap your buttons. This is going to be the P1 and 2 on the fight pad, and then P3 and 4, the 2 rear buttons. This is really cool as well. You can also customize toggling and clicking in the slider wheel, which I think is really cool. Although this makes sense to leave this default. Profiles, you do flash them from the app to the onboard storage, just like the stealth. And you can do this on the Xbox version of the app as well. I don't know if there's this pivot app, but there is an app on Xbox for the real stealth. And then overview is going to be a summary of all the customization you've done in these tabs. The next thing I need to trounce up and down is going to be this 20-hour battery life. Now, manufacturers notoriously do claim a little bit high. I was able to kill this controller in 8 hours with the screen on. There's no RGB, but the screen brightness at full, vibration on, that immersive adjustable vibration feedback. 8 hours. That's a huge difference from 20 hours. Now, a little history about my relationship with Turtle Beach. I did have the distinct honor of testing their first controller ever about 2 months prior to public release so I could get my thoughts out to my audience, which was fantastic. And that was also the first time I was able to test a product prior to public release. Since then, I've also been part of the early testing process for the Dun Wyvern one-handed keyboard, gave my feedback to the owner. Lo and behold, a lot of my feedback was implemented on the final product. That was really cool. Back to Turtle Beach though. Then they released a second controller, which was a slightly cheaper, slightly feature stripped down, a little bit cooler looking in my opinion, Turtle Beach Reactor controller. These are both $40 wired Xbox controllers, around $40. They've been out for a while now. You're going to see them around that $40 price point on Amazon. I do have initial reviews for both of these linked in the description below. Then Turtle Beach came out of absolutely nowhere, really caught us off guard with a high-end Pro controller, a $200 wireless Hall effect, 4 rear button, trigger lock stop system, you know, full-on flagship Pro controller, which was really surprising. Now, if you haven't been plagued by any of the connectivity issues when on the Xbox side of the house, or any of the niche reliability issues that I'm hearing on Amazon reviews and also just digging through the internet, then you're probably gold for Xbox and PC. Not Xbox Gold, but you're probably gold on the console, considering that controller does stand shoulder to shoulder with the high-end flagships like the Scuf Instinct Pro, the Elite 2, AIM, Hex, all the expensive pads. I haven't had any issues with my stealth other than the little connectivity jankage issues, which I made a separate video for. Other than that, no issues there. Do have some complaints in my initial review, which is also linked in the description below. So I like their two $40 wired pads. I like the Stealth Pro. Do not like the pivot. It doesn't really make sense in their model lineup, considering if somebody wants a budget wired pad, they're going to go for what is now probably a cheaper slash down, because it's been out a while, Reactor or Recon. And then if they want a high-end flagship controller that has a lot of meat and gusto to it, a lot of features like the screen and 4 remappable rear buttons, they're going to go with the Stealth. The pivot over here is only wireless on PC, and no matter what platform you're on, just doesn't feel good. The pivotable modules should have either been removable and swappable to where if you do get stick drift, which you can with Hall Effect thumbstick modules, or one of the buttons gets stuck in because they are membrane, and that is very common in membrane switches. And unlike a typical controller where you can do a quick teardown or disassembly and unwedge that button really easy, these little pivot modules are a bit more finicky to tear down or disassemble. So your options are do a warranty claim, which is only 1 year through Turtle Beach, or just suck it up and buy yourself a new $130 controller, or follow the advice of Gamer Heaven and just pivot away from this controller in the first place. This controller is linked in the description below, alongside my initial reviews for the previous Turtle Beach controllers. Drop in the comment section below what you think of the pivot, and I will see you stallions and stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. Fuck me. I just realized at the end of this review, and this is a huge con and a big old note for Turtle Beach, please don't do this again. Stealth is in the name of this model. This should have been its own model, its own naming scheme. The pivot, I understand what you tried to do here. You're trying to bank off the success of the Stealth controller by including that in this controller, which inevitably is actually going to bring down the name of Stealth. This should have just been called the Pivot, but it actually is called the Stealth Pivot, which is depressing because there's already a controller called the Stealth, which is a lot better than this thing. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, control freaks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more stallions and stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.